Life is full of mysteries, many of which we will never solve. Throughout my life, I've had many things occur to me that I cannot explain. But ultimately, these events have shaped my belief system and my perception of reality. Ever since I was a little boy, I was very curious about the afterlife and anything related to the paranormal. In fact, I grew up reading many science fiction novels, books about aliens, spirits, and astronomy. My grandmother was a very gifted person in that she had the gift of precognition, which is the ability to see future events before they even happen. Many friends in her hometown would come visit her on a regular basis just because of her ability. She would grab someone's hands, and in a matter of minutes, she would begin to see images in her mind about their life, but she never charged anyone a single cent. Mind you, she was also a very spiritual Catholic woman, very devoted to God, and she never did anything to acquire this skill. It was already inherent within her, but she didn't become aware of it till she was in her late 20s. She also had this knack for manifesting things very quickly. At one point, she even opened up her own business, a little shop in the center of town that just took off. And with that, she was able to make a decent living for herself. I think her faith also played a big role in that because she would often pray 3 times a day, which was crazy, but she was very devoted. She was like a magnet in that she would draw people and things towards her as if by magic. Eventually, she passed away in 1996. She was 86 years old. And as for myself, I was about 14 at the time. But her death made me realize that there was more to life than what we experience through our senses. And I say this because the day after she passed away, something very strange happened that till this day, I will never forget. It was about 6 a.m. in the morning. I was getting ready for school, so I sat down at the table where my mom and brother were having breakfast. My mom was about to head out for work, and well, my brother was also preparing to leave for school. So, as the 3 of us sat there talking and eating our food, all of a sudden our dog Cookie begins to bark excessively, which was pretty unusual because he never barked inside the apartment. He was a very quiet Labrador, even around other dogs, very well behaved. And that's what kind of struck me as odd. So I went to check up on him to see what all the fuss was about. As I walked towards the kitchen where he was sitting, I noticed that his gaze was fixated on something right above him. So I looked around, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. To me, it seemed as if he was barking at something in the ceiling. So I calmed him down a bit and took him to his bed, which was near the living room. He immediately stopped barking, and so I went back to the table to finish my breakfast. Then about a minute later, he runs out of his bed and goes towards the same spot where he was sitting at earlier and begins barking again. That's when my mom got upset, and so she stood up and told him to calm down, but he wouldn't listen. So my mom then grabbed him, took him inside the kitchen, and gave him some food, thinking he might be hungry. Everything seemed rather quiet after that, but it wasn't too long before he actually started barking again. This time though, something very odd happened. My brother and I noticed that the kitchen light was flickering on and off. So I got up and walked to go see if there was anything wrong with the light bulb. And as I'm nearing the kitchen, to my surprise, I see Cookie sitting halfway near the entryway that separates the kitchen from the dining room. He was barking at nothing but thin air. Yet, the weirdest part is that I kind of got the feeling that something or someone was standing right in front of him. That's when I paused for a second, and in my mind, I said, "Grandma, are you here in the apartment?" And I kid you not, seconds later, I got the goosebumps. So in shock, I looked back towards the table and I asked, "Did you guys just feel that?" My mom and brother stood there surprised and replied, "We did." So I asked them, "What exactly did you guys feel?" And to my disbelief, they said, "It was like the hairs in the back of our neck stood up," which is exactly the same thing I felt. But not only that, I told them about what was racing through my mind at the time, which was the thought of my grandmother being there with us. And they actually told me that they were thinking the same exact thing, which to me was unusual because I've never had anything like that happen to me before, where a group of people have the same experience at the same time and in the same vicinity. It was very bizarre to say the least. Yet, what's also crazy is that about a week later after this strange ordeal happened, the phone in our house began to ring several times a day for almost 6 days. And every time someone went to pick it up, there was no one on the other end of the line. It got to a point where my mom actually got frustrated and decided not to answer it. Mind you, this was back in the 90s when there was analog phones, the ones with the little wheel dial. Interestingly though, one day while my mom was at work and I was home alone, the phone rang again. And I remember my mom specifically telling me not to answer the phone because of the weird calls that we were getting. But curiosity kind of got the better of me, so I reached out, grabbed the phone and said hello. But there was no response or dial tone whatsoever. I waited for a couple of seconds, but nothing. So I hung up, shrugged it off and went back to my room to read some books. And roughly about 20 minutes later, the phone rings for the second time. Now at this point, I'm both freaked out and upset at the same time, especially after the incident that happened in the dining room a week prior, which to me was a little creepy. So I got back up, went to the phone and picked it up. But this time I was a bit angry. So in a loud, firm voice, I said, "Please stop calling this number. It's getting really annoying." And that's when I heard a slight breathing noise on the other end of the line, which made the hairs in my arms stand up. But I finally knew that there was someone there. So again, in a loud voice, I said, "Stop playing around and stop calling this house." And I hung up after that. Then, just as I'm about to walk away from the phone, it rings once more. So I pick it up and I say the same thing that I said earlier, but this time I didn't hear anything. However, I did stay on the line listening for a bit, and I don't know why, but the image of my grandmother just popped into my head, and just like that, I called out her name on the phone. As soon as I did, I heard a dial tone, as if someone had hung up. I was a little speechless after that because I didn't know what to think. Yet the wild thing is that after I said her name, those strange phone calls just suddenly stopped. Till this day, those 2 weeks have been the strangest 2 weeks of my entire life. And it's a mystery that will stay with me till the day I die. Yet my family and I do believe that it was the spirit of my grandmother that was there with us those days, perhaps trying to say goodbye to us in her own way before setting out to the afterlife. So I wanted to share this story with you guys because I know there's a lot of people that don't believe in life after death, but from my own personal supernatural / paranormal experiences throughout my life, I can say that there is more to this life than what our eyes perceive.